when your meeting with the journalist starts, it
Mhm.
starts, right? It might not have been, we'll mic you up and then when you sit down, then we'll tell you when the camera is rolling. But it's things that you say on the way to that. It's the little coffee, it's the little exchanges. And they're great. They're great to have for both the journalist and for you because it establishes rapport and you can suss each other out. But you should be aware that it's on the record
Yep.
unless and until we talk ground rules, and that's off the record, background, on the record, whatever it is. Things can always be said in the heat of the moment or things that you want to say off record. Just tell me at whatever point, hey, I want to go off the record.
Sounds good.
Edo Perry from Elements, thanks for coming on to the Jargonizer.
Thank you for inviting.
Give us just a very, very brief introduction to yourself and Elements.
I grew up in the Bay Area in California. Climate awareness in California is very advanced. And so it's been in my DNA for as long as I remember myself. My last position was at Apple. I was a project manager in the sustainability field. And at some point I realized while working at Apple is that there's net zero goals that companies have set out. There's regulation that's coming into place. Companies and their employees and investors and stakeholders are pushing them more towards sustainability. And I decided to start Elements, which helps companies reach those net zero goals and engaging their workforce.
What is it like to leave Apple?
Not an easy thing to do with all its benefits and all the packages that you get from that. But at some point, I just realized that even though I'm working on climate, in the end, it's not their main business. And I decided for myself that I wanted to go fully on board on climate and help companies from outside do that. And today, we're working with Apple. So it's circle closes, so.
Brilliant. It's an app, right?
Yeah. So what is Elements? Elements is an app that both monitors accurately the Scope 3 emissions that are attributed to employees.
I'm sorry, what is Scope 3? Just for the unscoped?
Companies need to measure what their carbon emissions that they're emitting. Scope 1 being their direct emissions, such as AC, heating, cooling, that kind of thing. Scope 2, indirect emissions, the electricity manufacturers that are creating that electricity for you to turn on the lights. Scope 3 is supply chain. And employees commuting, business travel, and working from home is either in Scope 3 or they're talking about Scope 4 now, which is all the avoided emissions that you can avoid. So that's the Scope 1, 2, and 3. And we're targeting specifically Scope 3 emissions of employees to help them reduce emissions, monitor, and offer them solutions to reduce those emissions and live a more sustainable and a cost-saving life. Yeah.
I have seen articles about everything from greenwashing, which is companies just ticking boxes and doing PR campaigns that have no real effect on their Scope 1 or 2 or 3 commitments. What is the main narrative right now? Where are we in the story?
The biggest corporates around the world, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, Amazon, they all have these net zero goals that have put into place.
It's voluntary or they have to do that?
The European Union that are now putting out bills that require companies of 500 employees and above to report on environmental action, including carbon emissions. But the big corporates are doing it kind of voluntarily right now. It's moving in the direction that it will be regulated. And I'll give you an example. Tech companies, let's say Uber and TikTok and Airbnb, and they're software companies in the end. Most of their emission data centers and employee commuting, business travel, those kind of things. And that's why we're first targeting software companies. But
why? Because it's easier to capture that data?
Not just to capture, but it's also the majority of their emissions. The majority of emissions from companies come from their Scope 3 emissions, actually. The supply chain, mostly. Intel, HP, Nike, AB InBev, all these companies that have large manufacturing facilities, they have emissions from their supply chain, and it's hard to measure. It's a very difficult task to go and measure the Scope 1 and 2 emissions of your provider in a total different country. Most companies around the world are still, first of all, measuring the 1 and 2. After they got that done, then they move to Scope 3.
Hold on, just that I understand. Most of the emissions from companies are Scope 3.
Correct.
But most of the focus right now is on Scope 1 and 2?
Because it's easier to measure. So they're starting with that, and then...
But who decided on that? I mean, that doesn't...
It doesn't make sense, correct?
That can't be right. Let's go back. This is fascinating. I don't want to lose the thread.
Yeah.
Elements is a company that you've started to tackle Scope 3 emissions, which is the hard stuff. Supply chains, your vendors. It's harder to measure because there's more moving parts. Scope 1 and 2 are things that are easier to measure. Electricity bills, the water bills, the utilities. What other things are in Scope 1 and 2 that these big companies are already doing?
If you have a fleet of cars for deliveries and things like that, like I mentioned before, heating, cooling of your buildings, Those kinds of things are what they measure for scope 1 and 2.
And that's easy because you have a look at your energy bills and your gas
It's not
bills and
easy too,
miles driven.
but yeah, it's a bit easier. It's a bit easier to do. I'll give you an example. If you're a company like Apple and you're buying electronics and you're buying tables and things for your office, for your employees, you ship that from places like China or other places around the world. You have to understand the emissions of the manufacturing company in China. It's a hard thing to measure in the end because they have to measure the 1 and 2. So that's why it's a difficult task.
Can I just pause there for a second? Because I know that companies like Apple have started to check whether their supply chains around the world and the companies they work with are flagged for sanctions, flagged for child labor. I mean, you got to know, right? So they're already checking certain things about these companies.
Can't get into too much details of what happens at Apple. From what I can say, they're trying to make a dramatic shift in how the products are operating, how they manufacture the actual products themselves. They're trying to make it from recycled materials and all that kind of stuff.
Where would you say, on a scale of 1 to 10, is the beginnings really tackling scope 3, and where does Elements fit into that? How do you guys unlock that?
Yeah, so from 1 to 10, I would say we're in like 2, 3.
This is for scope 3, right?
Yep, scope 3. Even the big corporates are still having a hard time measuring that. And where Elements comes into place is specifically the employees commuting, business travel, and working from home. Now, why is that interesting? And why did we actually go into that sector? And the reason is because it has a double impact. We're not just reducing the emissions, but we're also educating their employees about sustainability. So without having your employees on board and understanding the need to reach those net zero goals, no company is going to reach those goals. You have to have everyone on board. The app is a way for your employer to engage with your employees on sustainability, teach them about climate, teach them about sustainable materials if you're a manufacturing company, teach them about how to save energy in your home. And that obviously translates into the company. So I'm a big believer in behavioral change. It's a very difficult task that we're trying to tackle. Behavioral change is super difficult.
Can you give us a little teaser of that? I don't know, an anecdote, a trend, anything that works? One
of the biggest things that we're trying to tackle is the gamification part. So we've gamified our app and made it fun and engaging for people. Because in the end, we're living in a world that's moving more and more into that kind of gamified points, ranking, leaderboards, those kinds of things. People feel good about themselves and they like to compete with other team members.
I love games, but I also have kids. I don't love games anymore. What is the change? Is it our electricity bills get lower? Do I get benefits from my company? How does that work?
Yeah. So I'll walk you through it.
Yeah.
Basically, you're an employee. You get an email from your company, from your employer saying, hey, we care about the planet and our employees. Here's $500 credits. Here's $1,000 credit to spend on the Elements app and to use to reduce your emissions and save money. And then we have what we call the sustainability shop, where we have different vendors, different partners that we've partnered with, such as edge solar panels and heat pumps and smart meters and electric vehicle companies. We have a wide range of different providers. And we really fit the products for each employee individually. So if you're a home owner, or if you're a renter, if you're in New York, or if you're in California or in Israel, the idea is to really fit the needs of each employee individually. We've introduced a whole new sector we call the climate benefit. So just as health benefits are standard in the US, and 401k, pension funds, dental, visual, we're trying to create the climate benefit.
Let me understand this. If I bring down my energy usage at home, does that have any impact on my company's scope 3 emissions? I mean, they might just say, well, our employees are using less energy. We'll give them $500, but we could still be vastly under where we need to be as a corporation. So how do you stop internal greenwashing?
If a company gives you a certain amount of credit, dollars to spend on renewable energy and those kinds of things, there are also actually tax reimbursements that company can get. So it's also a financial benefit for the company to do that instead of giving $1,000 for something that you don't actually need. And the second part of that is specifically working from home. So when you're working from home, whatever the hours that you're working, you're using energy, right? You're heating, you're cooling, you're using your computer.
For your company or for your...
Yeah, for your company. And it makes sense, I think. Like it makes sense that the company would pay you for that energy and help you transition your home to renewable energy.
If my electricity bill goes down and I take more public transport, that affects my company because they get tax breaks, but they're not necessarily becoming more green.
They are, because they're reducing their emissions. They are becoming more green. Think about it. If you're taking the public transportation if you're reducing your energy bill, if you're taking less business travel, less flights, that all goes towards the company. So they're reducing those emissions that go towards the company that you work at. They're becoming more green, and like we're creating this culture of climate responsibility within the company, with the employees. So it has effects on other things like the products. I'll give you an example. Nike. I had a conversation with the sustainability team there, and what they mentioned was that if their designers don't think of sustainable materials within their way of designing the next Nike shoe, how are they going to reach those goals? It's very difficult. So that's why they're incorporating it in the core business of the company.
I'm a bit of a skeptic here, as you can tell. On 2 points, I'm still not convinced that employees might be greenwashing their own company. So I want to talk about that. But there are other skeptics who say, oh, look, these individual actions are drops in the ocean compared to industrial emissions.
Yeah, we can start with the second one, I think, is because it's one that I've been discussing a lot lately. There's a lot of different options that you can do. Renewable energies, you can do offsets, there's so many projects companies can do out now to reduce their emissions. Either transitioning their facilities to renewable energy, buying different credits from different companies. And then comes a third option, which is what we do. It has a double impact on both the company and the employees. It's a win-win for both sides. Let's say Apple decides to buy carbon offsets, spend $1,000 per ton of CO2 that's emitted. If they give that $1,000 to their employee, the impact is much better for both them and the employee.
But it's a drop in the ocean, right? It's not like...
Okay, correct. So I have a lot to say about that, but I'll start by saying the way that Tesla started. How did they start? They started with the Roadster, right? They built a car that's sexy, that's cool, and it was very high-end luxury car. And then slowly, they reduced the pricing, and now they're going to launch a car that's even more cheaper than the Model 3. So the same kind of concept is what we're trying to do. We're starting with the big tech companies that have chief sustainability officers in place in the company, super high-ranking officials, second in command underneath the CEOs, and they already have those kind of goals set out. We started out B2C, and then we shifted to B2B2C because
started
that
out
incentive.
as B2C, then you went B2B.
Correct.
And you're going to go, the next step is direct to consumer.
Further down the line.
D2C.
Yeah. Could be.
Sorry, what is the difference between B2C and D2C? I mean, you're selling to consumers. What is the difference?
D2C, basically, we're now going B2B2C. So we're going through companies, through corporates, to their employees.
B2B2C.
Yeah, correct.
Right, so business to business is you to them to their employee.
Exactly.
So it's B to B2E.
Yeah, that's a new term that you've invented right now. B2B2E.
All right, let's just go back to the story.
Yeah.
All right. Is this a drop in the ocean, or is this a waterfall effect? How do you think it's going to work?
How do you get to work?
I work from home.
Okay.
At least once or twice a week. I get on an electric scooter. I go to the train, take the train into somewhere, get off.
Amazing.
I'll also take cabs. And once every couple of months, I'll fly. But mostly that's it.
Yeah. So you have
Easy,
to get
low carbon footprint.
Yeah, actually, very amazing. You do a good job. So I drive a car. I'm vegan. I don't buy clothes. I don't have kids. I don't invest in fossil fuels through my pension funds, which is one of the most way to reduce emissions is by doing that. I do anything I can, but I do drive a car, and I still don't have an electric car. Obviously, I'd like to switch to an electric car, but not yet, because in the end, I still need to get from A to B, or from A to wherever I'm going. And most people in the world...
B to C.
Yeah, exactly. And most people around the world still need to consume. We're not going to change that. And so I'm a big believer in that we need to change the way we live, the way we think, the way we act, the way we consume.
Let's go into that behavioral economics of this. Now, you mentioned you have a gamification approach. Give us a few examples of that.
Amazing. So I'll give you an example from Estee Lauder, which is another company that we're working with. The recycling and commuting and education is really important for them. So we have different kind of challenges like webinars and things like that if the employees onboard and do that, then they get more points and more credit to use.
Take us through that.
We ask a few questions to understand your needs specifically. So how many people are living in your home? Do you live in a house, an apartment? How much energy you're using? And then with that, we basically understand what kind of products fit your needs specifically. And through different APIs that we've done and integrations, we basically know how to help you save more on your energy bill. We measure that electricity usage and then tell you, listen, if you charge your electric vehicle on peak hours, you're emitting more, it could cost you more money. Versus if you do it at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. when less people are charging their electric vehicles, then you save more money and you're emitting less. Then you get points for doing that. So it's a whole mechanism of incentivizing employees to do that.
Is it okay if we do a demo? Would you be open to giving us kind of a walkthrough if I shared screen?
Yeah, sure. We can do that.
Climate engagement platform benefiting you and our planet.
You insert your details. What do you actually care about? Solar, waste, green investments, smart products, EV. How do you commute to work? Car, carpool, bus, shuttle, all those different things. Your home address, the type of home, house, apartment, how many people living in the home, your average electricity bill. And then, congrats, you just earned the Elements badge for joining, plus 10 points.
What I get for those 10 points?
Those points, are then translated into actual cash that you can spend on the platform. So that's the idea.
So this is like your Delta Airlines or my Lufthansa point system.
Exactly. We're working to get that with credit cards so that if you get your rewards, all those kind of things, you could spend it on our platform. And then you see the CO2 that you've saved. And through those data, we know how much emissions you've lowered and how much you've saved. And the companies are paying us per active user.
Let's say this is plugged in now to a lot of companies. You're growing nicely. You become a sustainability marketplace? No, a sustainability...
We call it the climate engagement platform for employees. That's what we are.
Climate engagement platform for employees. A marketplace of sorts where you vet companies that you think make the planet more sustainable. There's incentives and points and everyone's on board. And we look a few years into the future. What kind of impact do you think you could see here, really? What are you unlocking in what's making Scope 3 so hard?
Yeah. First of all, the accuracy that we get is very hard to measure. And that's what we come into place. Most companies make estimates on how much emissions their employees are emitting. Second thing I would say, Gen Z and millennials are 60% of the workforce today. They're becoming more vocal about climate and environmental social aspects. They want to have these kind of solutions within their companies, and they're actually leaving companies if they don't have it. Just by commuting in a more sustainable manner, you can reduce 2-3 tons per employee per year. By eating less meat, by doing like Meatless Monday, you're emitting less. By buying less clothes. That's a lot of emissions. And Apple has 164,000 employees. Amazon has 1.6 million employees. Think about how much homes that it impacts. I think it has a big impact both on the emissions part, but also on the educational and awareness part.
What are the challenges when you talk to companies, to investors?
So the knowledge about what is emissions and what do I need to report and what is renewable energy, those terms are still are not entrenched in HR departments. As Gen Z become more vocal about it, they'll have to be. Just as diversity is in 2022, it was the topic for HRs. I believe that 2023 and 2024 is going to be sustainability.
I understand why diversity would go to HR, even though I think HR is where good deeds go to die. If this is going to take time and a lot of education with the way climate change is going, it might not have that time. Why are you going to HR?
Because in the end, they're working with people and we have to have them on board, want them on board, and we're working with them. Some companies are very old-fashioned and their employees are, the average is 35 to 50, something like that. So it's very hard to retain them and to attract them with new kind of things. And our solution is a very innovative tool. So for a lot of HRs, this is something we haven't heard of before, something new. And maybe it's a way to retain our employees.
I would be interested in free childcare and permanent time off or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah.
What you're saying is companies can attract employees and retain employees by offering them climate benefits, a chance to reduce, reuse, and recycle in their own lives, and then also benefit their company because they know that by doing this, their companies are also undertaking a commitment to lower their carbon footprint across all their vendor supply chains. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it does. That's exactly why we're doing it. In the end, most people care about saving money, being appreciative of their work, of their environment, of their job, being able to share with other people, being able to progress within your company. That's what most people care about. If we help save people money and give them options on how to live more healthier and how to live more sustainably, I believe we can unlock that.
We always go back to the behavioral science of this. I think this seems to be the crux, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Most people are really interested in job security or income security, retirement savings, mortgages, money, especially in tough times. Money is almost everything to most people. And kind of Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Correct.
Having a nice impact, a good impact on climate change is a nice to have. And you're saying that the behavioral work, why can't I say that word? Behavioral
change
is connecting the nice to have with the absolute must have.
Correct.
Through money.
Correct.
Right.
And more than that, through health too. And I'll give you an example. In New York, in the beginning of June, one of the craziest wildfires from Canada, saw the orange skies that happened. It was insane. And I know a lot of people that are also on the app in different companies that we're working with that were scared shitless. Like literally, they didn't go outside for the whole day, for 2.5 days, just because of this. It was like smoking 6 cigarettes just by breathing that air. Same thing happened in California in 2020 with their wildfires. So people, especially in the US and in Europe, are becoming more afraid also about climate change and those effects. It's sad, but it's happening. All those things together is this puzzle that people are starting to be more and more worried about.
I get why climate action is supremely important, but I also feel personally what keeps me and quite a few other people, I think, from really doing more of this stuff is the sense that we can't really affect it. I mean, yeah, we recycle. We do the best we can. Can you just take me over what happens when hundreds of thousands and millions of employees at big companies are using elements and you're scaling this?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
The ADT signs that you have in the US?
ADT is a security company.
Correct. The blue kind of signs that you have outside your home?
Yeah, sure.
So imagine the same kind of concept, but having powered by elements and having that outside your home where you can share that with your neighbors and you spread that word about that you're shifting yourself to climate and creating that network effect. That's what we're trying to do. Right?
So you asked for this, okay? And I'll be gentle. I come from South Africa. Those ADT signs and others like them are everywhere. And the truth behind that is that those signs mask a deeply broken law enforcement and criminal justice.
But in South Africa, are you talking about?
In South Africa.
Interesting. Okay.
And when you make the connection between private security firms that are doing the work that the authorities should be doing, aren't doing for whatever, could be corruption, could be bad management, it could be not enough tax, it could be a ton of different things. But it does show that the basic contract between a state and its citizens of the right to life, to protection is just broken. So people are paying for private security firms. And so this is a really tough question, but I think you'll be fine with it because you've already spoken about this, is how concerned are you that elements could be like that ADT sign where it's used by corporations really as kind of a tool that says, look, we're doing our part, but in a way it's masking the fact that these are really only rich tech companies that can afford to do this stuff and have chief sustainability officer, whereas the bigger picture is that there is a system failure.
The reason I connected with the ADT sign was just because of the effect that it had on people, where you saw that ADT sign outside, not because of the security itself and but I understand your question. Yeah,
but just to put a final point on that, when I see an ADT sign, I don't see, oh, that's a secure house. I think this country's fucked.
Okay, interesting. Great point, I must say. But I will say this. I believe that the future of our world is moving, is shifting. It's becoming hotter. We eventually want to expand to everyone and anyone, not just corporates and not just tech companies. Municipalities contacted me and wanted to do this with elements. Governments, manufacturing companies, oil companies even contacted us and wanted to do this.
And what's your answer to the oil companies, polluters?
It's been an environmental debate for many years now. And my true, honest answer is that if they want to make that shift and they want us to help them specifically with their employees, even a little bit, instead of investing in an oil field, they'll do anyways. If they spend a little more on climate, I'm for that. Most of the oil companies are investing more in sustainability than any other company out there.
They're also polluting more than any other company out there.
I agree with you completely. But again, it goes back to consumers. This has been a big greenwashing campaign about how large oil companies are trying to blame it on consumers and blame it on little people.
I asked you a complicated, tough question, and I feel like I'm still trying to grasp you. I feel like you you've made some good points, but I think we should try it again. It's a tough question, and you should take a moment to kind of acknowledge that this could be the central tension in your story at the moment, the skepticism in your story at the moment, especially from, let's say, journalists who cover this. How do you avoid this becoming greenwashing? When you're taking all this data from employees and they're uploading their electricity bills, what are you doing on the other side to check that the electricity bills of the actual company and everything that they're committed to doing is actually happening, and that you're not just putting a lot of greenwashing potential in the hands of employers? Maybe just treat this as this is a big question.
Yeah.
This is something that, we absolutely have been struggling with. And let's put it on the table. And so I call this bridging, but it really is just having an honest conversation that says, yes, it is an issue. This is how we think about it. And this is how we're trying to build. And then take me over the bridge with you.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I think of as you say that. The first one, you could say that about anything that a company does regarding climate. You could say that about Apple that's investing $200 million in planting trees, right? You could say they're greenwashing all their iPhones and all that. You could say that about offsetting emissions. I'm not saying that as a good thing. I'm just saying people would speak about greenwashing and what companies are trying to do on any project that they're doing if they're not, cease to exist in the end. So that's one thing. The second part of that is that if we talk about competitors and we talk about other folks out there, we are accurate. And the way we become accurate is by actually measuring through smart meters and through commuting vendors that we are working with. So we know that if you take a Lime scooter, the minute you took the Lime scooter until you got to your work, we know that path and we know that the actual amount of emissions. That's direct, that's accurate. The amount of solar panels that you put. So all these different things, we have those data points and know how to measure accurately the amount of emissions. I hope that answers a bit of your question.
It answers for me more about how you feel about the question. It feels to me, and I might be wrong, that, and this is what I actually like about it, because you're grappling with this. You don't have the messaging yet, which I think is good. I think at this point, you're grappling with it. So here's how potentially I would answer the question or think about answering the question.
Yeah.
Which would be something like, we are absolutely being asked and gonna be asked the exact same question that anyone working in carbon footprint reduction. Every company who says they're doing something needs to be checked. There are benchmarks out there. Not dodging this question. Absolutely understand where this is coming from. So thank you for asking that question, because this is something that everyone's dealing with.
Yeah.
Our view of the stack, remember, we're scope 3. There's scope 1 and 2. And even in scope 3, there's a lot of stuff going on. Now there's even scope 4.
Yeah.
We think that the first step is to start to accurately measure as much as possible of the employees' carbon footprint. Travel, electricity. Are they even educating themselves about this stuff? Right? That's important. And we can talk about that. How do you get great content? But we think scope 3 is vastly under-serviced. And what we still have to really figure out is, how do we report back to our users, which are the employees? What are we saying to them that we're seeing that their companies are reporting in their larger reporting, their annual or shareholders or quarterly or to our own internal communications? How do we hold them to account? How do we know that this is working?
Yeah. It's a great answer. I will be honest.
Okay, we've gone on a long road trip here. We started off with introducing you and how you've gotten to this point and why you're doing what you're doing. And then we've gotten into how it works, what it looks like, what are the challenges, and then at a bigger picture, which is if and when this is scaled and this is really starting to make a difference. I still feel like there's a piece of the bigger picture that we're missing, and maybe we should just look at this briefly, is what's coming from the governments, policies, regulations, smart, blunt, more forceful, whatever it is. What do you think needs to come from the governments down to the corporations?
Carbon taxes. Carbon taxes, that's what they need to do. That's what will require companies to report and accurately measure their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Because if they're not doing it accurately, they're going to be paying shit ton of money on trying to, reduce those emissions somehow.
Okay, so
yeah.
Edo, is there anything that you think I've missed? Is there something that you feel like you wanted to say?
The last thing is just from speaking with over 50 corporates around the world, HP, Intel, Microsoft, Salesforce, Nike, all these different companies, I see this trend that's happening. I'm very optimistic. Like, you see me smiling. I'm a very optimistic person. I see that the trend is moving in a more positive way, not as fast as I would want it to happen, but definitely more companies are getting on board, more employees are getting on board.
Great. Was there anything that you said that you feel could get you in trouble?
No, the companies that I mentioned, you can share, being Apple, Estee Lauder, Lemonade.
Yeah, those are nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. This has really been fun, not easy episode. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Right?
Climate's not easy.
Climate's not easy. Greenwashing is not easy. Changing people's behavior is not easy. But I think we talked about really cool stuff.